Hello YouTube, this is Froogle, and of course this is the PMDG 777-200, actually the Saudia version, because today we are at King Khaled International in Saudi Arabia and we're flying to Dubai. Now this is only a 90-minute flight, but despite the reputation of the 777 as being a very long-haul aircraft, which it really is, this is actually a scheduled flight that happens very frequently for Saudia. So little 90-minute hop from King Khaled down to Dubai, and the reason for this short hop is really to show you FS2CREW. Now, long-time viewers of this channel will know that I'm a big fan of FS2CREW. The reason being that no matter how realistic PMDG make these aircraft, ultimately they're not very realistic at all, because once you get in the cockpit, you're in there, or flight deck, sorry, you're in there all on your own. And 737s, 747s, 777s, and so on are never, ever completely flown by a single person. FS2CREW fixes that. It gives you a voice-controlled first officer who will do everything a first officer should do. So really it extends the simulation somewhat in that it turns your role from a complete systems manager, pilot, captain, first officer combined thing into the captain. So you're responsible for the management of the aircraft and the management of your first officer. You direct him, he double checks you and verifies everything you're doing as well. So in some respects it simplifies flying the aircraft, in other respects it greatly adds to the authenticity and realism. Let's jump in the cockpit here. Those of you who have seen FS2CREW before will be interested to see the changes here. There are quite a lot of changes, so let me pop this open. There's the familiar bar. I'm going to put the hard mute on so it doesn't pick up everything I'm saying. In fact, we will do a little test before we go any further to make sure it does pick me up at the very least. Checked. Yeah, it is picking up my voice, but because hard mute is on, it's not going to respond to anything I say, which is fantastic. So you'll notice that the bar looks a little bit different to usual. It's a little bit longer, and gone are the volume knobs on the first officer and the PA system and cabin. In their place now you have these up and down arrows, so we can change the volume of the first officer with up and down there, change the volume of the cabin. So I have the cabin around about 5 or 6, first officer obviously is maximum. Next up, configuration. They've taken a cue really from the Airbus version of this, in that you don't have a configuration panel that pops up like you used to have on the 737. What you actually have now is a series of options that you can go through. So you can see there I'm outputting my sound to the wrong place. Actually, let me go ahead and change that. That's good that we checked that. It needs to be outputting the sound to my HDMI because that's where I'm recording on. There we go, AVerMedia. Cool. So the sound's being output to the correct place now. My crew accent, you can change the various accents here. The US crew now actually have a female voice. The first officer is a female from the US, and that's a big deal because they actually got hold of a proper, fully qualified captain, I think, and had her record all the words, so that's pretty awesome. The British crew, the UK crew, is actually Ben Weston. As far as I'm aware, it might have changed, but I remember for a couple of months ago, Ben Weston, who did all the Dash 8 tutorials, actually recorded the UK voice. That might have changed, but I do remember it being best Ben. EU voices, Australian voices, and that's about it. We're going to go with the US crew, even though we're flying a Saudi aircraft, because there are no Arabic accents in there. And it's all about accents more than anything else. Let's click on config. What else have we got? FS2CREW controls the jetways, yes. Doors, yes. Online map, you can turn the online map on and off. I did get a comment from somebody on the Facebook page that they didn't like FS2CREW because it broadcasts what they're doing to a display of Google Maps on the FS2CREW website. I actually don't mind, but it is turned off. No particular reason for it to be turned off, it just is. Option here for 10,000 foot lights. So are they being managed? Yes, they are. That's pretty standard procedures. Now this is interesting. Checklist electronic. As you know, the 777 has an electronic checklist, and what will happen is if you leave this set to electronic, then when you run through a checklist, the first officer will actually pop open the CDU in a little window down here and show you the checklist, and you can work through the items in it. That's actually very useful because that checklist gives you the prompts as to how you're supposed to respond to a lot of the checklist items, which is very useful indeed. If you want to go hardcore, you can just click on these buttons here and make that paper there, at which point it won't pop open that display. You'll have no prompts on screen and you have to figure it all out yourself. We're going to leave it on electronic. What else have we got here? I keep on clicking the green bar, which I shouldn't. We have the first officer call out 400 foot climb. Great. Receive the load sheet from the gate agent. Yes, we like that. Enable the control key for soft mute. You can toggle that on and off. I've got it off. I'm using the FS2CREW key bindings and joystick bindings, so my soft mute is actually on my normal mic switch on my yoke here, which is cool. Enable radar altimeter alive call. What that means is as you descend and the radar altimeter suddenly figures out where you're at, your first officer will actually call out radio altimeter alive, which is handy in some instances. Flap speed check call. That's a hangover again from the Airbus version of FS2CREW. In the Airbus, if you were to call a flap setting like flaps 1, flaps 5, whatever, then the first officer would say speed check and then confirm what you've just ordered. So the reason for that is if you try to order too high a setting of flaps for your current speed, then the first officer will say speed check and then deny it. So it's handy having that in there. So the first officer is actually double checking your speeds. Dorm arming and disarming, yes, although I am having some confusion between what I'm supposed to do and what the first officer does in terms of door management, as you'll see in a minute. 1,000-foot call, 500-foot call, all of this stuff is very self-explanatory and simple. We have the usual PA announcements dialog down here, so you can click on these buttons to make a cabin announcement on welcome aboard, takeoff delay, top of descent, and so on, which is very, very cool. Nothing changed there. First off, FA, flight assistance, I think that is. We can click on that and summon the flight assistance and order drinks, which we'll be doing in flight. Ground. I've not clicked on this one yet. Let's see what happens. I think it's probably going to call it ground. Do I want to click it? No. Ah! So ground here, I can go ahead and choose ground power unit, air start unit, and I can connect all the ground systems. Great. That's more applicable to the voice, the button version of FS2CREW than the voice one, which I'm using. And by the way, difference there as well is the voice button here. You can toggle between the button edition or the voice edition of FS2CREW right from the FS2CREW bar, which is a neat change. We're using the voice one. Briefing is the usual briefing panel. You'll notice some interesting things here though. Takeoff thrust, full thrust, we can do reduced thrust down here as well. We can specify our concerns down here, which is great. What else is there in here? Noise abatement departure procedure selection is in there. Thrust reduction height, that's what I was looking at. Thrust reduction and acceleration heights. You can now specify those and change them for the briefing and how the first officer helps you at those various altitudes, which is all good stuff as well. The other big change is the length of time it takes to get everything running, or the length of time FS2CREW expects you to take to get everything running. Obviously we can skip time. Once this thing starts running, you have a time counter here and you can click on the arrow to rapidly move through the time countdown if you're running out of things to do, which is handy. But where the 737 and I think the Airbus and I think the Dash 8 all put you at 30 minutes before takeoff, or before taxi I should say, FS2CREW for the 777 puts you at nearly an hour before ready to go, which is an interminable delay, but I guess fairly realistic. Now a final difference, which you can't really see from these menu options, is actually pushback. Historically with FS2CREW, pushback has worked. You can choose FS2CREW to help you with the pushback. In the Airbus, you use the built-in pushback facility of that Aerosoft Airbus to actually do the pushback, and FS2CREW works in tandem with that. On the 737, it will do the push for you. On the 777, there is no facility for pushback, and the reason why, according to the manual, is Ultimate Ground Crew X. Now this is a new product that the FS2CREW chaps are developing. It was supposed to have been released by now, but it had a few delays, and I'm reliably informed by Brian over at FS2CREW that it will be out by or before first quarter of 2015. So not too long to wait, but then we're going to see an FS2CREW competitor to GSX. We will be using GSX for the pushback today. Now, for this flight, I do have a flight plan prepared. You're not going to see it. It's not a fully loaded flight, but I have a flight plan prepared, and we're going to enter all the information. But of course, the first thing we need to do is actually the pre-flight events. Now, because our aircraft is in the short panel state, that means it's already powered up. We already have external power connected. We're not running the APU. We don't need to do the electrical power-up procedure, which means we can go ahead and tell the first officer, welcome aboard, which we'll do right now.
Hi, Captain. How are you today?
Great, thanks. Or I'm great. I'm great. There we go. And there's the first issue. FS2CREW relies on the Windows voice recognition system. You need to accurately train it. I have not accurately trained this one since I reinstalled everything a little while ago, so it can be a little bit flaky at picking up exactly what I want it to pick up. Bear that in mind. So sometimes you'll find using FS2CREW you have to repeat things 3 or 4 times. Sometimes it will misunderstand you. The solution to that is to accurately train the voice recognition system. Anyway, First Officer is now running their pre-flight stuff. Notice 55 minutes to go. It is time for us to do our preliminary pre-flight procedure. So the first step of that is to go and turn on the Adaroos, otherwise we can't navigate. We'll turn that on. Then we will go down to the status displays, and we'll just jump through these and make sure everything looks good. So there's hydraulics. Fuel is not good because we've not loaded the correct amount of fuel, so we'll go ahead and do that right now. So down here I was actually messing with my options there. FS actions. Let's load the fuel on the payload right now so we know what we're doing. I'll just refer to my handy dandy trusty flight plan here, which I produced with PFPX. So my fuel on board, my release fuel, is 22,587 kilograms. 22,587. We will load that on. There's my fuel load. Now we'll go to the payload. I did a random payload in PFPX, and I don't really care about the number of passengers or the amount of cargo. What I care about is my zero fuel weight, which is 203,473 kilograms, or 203.4 is the zero fuel value you put in here. So 203.4. Load that in there. Good. So that is all set up. We'll pop back over here. Let's pop back to the status displays and we'll continue cycling through them. So air, okay, duct pressures are all 0, nothing's powered up right now. Doors, we've got some open. Obviously gear is fine, cold and down. Great. Now, normally at this point, before getting started, I would go ahead and do resets on all the checklists. You don't need to do that. You have a first officer now, and one of the tasks of that first officer is to do the resets. So we can ignore all of that. So having checked our displays, we're going to set the parking brake, make sure that we don't roll anywhere when the chocks come out. Come on, there it is. Parking brake's up. We will obtain the ATIS now. I'm using Active Sky Next for this, so just going to tune 12200. You can see the numbers changing there on the screen. I'm actually using a panel, a SciTech panel, to do this for me. So
Oscar, Echo, Romeo, Kilo, Airport Information, Golf 1600, Zulu, Weather, Wind 086, at 5, Visibility 10, Sky Clear, Temperature 30, Dew Point 3, QNH 1015, Advise on initial contact, you have information, Golf, Oscar, Echo,
right,
Romeo,
so
Kilo.
1015 on the QNH, so we'll switch this over to HPA and we'll go 10, if I can, 101, that's standard, 1015. So that's done. All that remains for us to do now is work through the CDU initialization. So it's saying it entered the inertial position. When you first initialize a 777, it actually walks you through the various screens you need to set up. Just keep on clicking that bottom right LSK. So pausing it, it says what is the inertial position. If we go to the next page, the Adaroos will have given us the GPS coordinates of the aircraft. Click on that. Go to the previous page and click on the LSK next to set inertial position. Done. Now we click on the bottom right LSK once again, taking us to the route. I have a company route, obviously, because I've exported this. You could export it from SimBrief or PFPX or your tool of choice. My route name today, well, I actually don't even need to know the route name. We can click on route request, click on 777. There is my route. Oscar Echo Romeo Kilo to Oscar Mike Delta Bravo 01. We'll click on that and say request, and then wait for the company data link to do its thing. So the request has been sent, just waiting for the ping pong as it comes back. There it is. So we'll load the route now. That is all being uploaded. Route 1 uplink is now loading. And when it's done loading, you'll see the display here change and the execute button, or sorry, activate will become an option and then execute after that. Let's finish setting all this up though. We are departing from runway 15 right today. And our flight number, well, we are Saudia, so Sierra Alpha Victor 552. We'll put that in. Activate, execute. Now we're told perf init is ready to go, so we'll click on perf init. There's our perf init values. Cost index of 85. The weights and balances are all in there. Cruise altitude of 370, so we will accept that. Let's go over to the thrust limits now. We are having a derated takeoff, a derate of takeoff derate 2 at 68 degrees. So we'll put that in there. That again was calculated for me by PFPX and TopCat. If you guys want to see a video on how to calculate all that stuff and it working with PFPX and TopCat, I can certainly make one for you. So derated takeoff number 2, 68 degrees. We're good. Let's go to the takeoff page now. It will be a flaps 5 takeoff. Our center of gravity is 30%, giving us a 3.5 trim, and our refs are V1 of 148, VR of 148, and V2 of 150. So that's all good. Wind data is now ready. Let's go to the legs page. Click on route data, and we will load the wind data in. You'll see these highlight white, like so. So we will execute that. We have our wind data in. Descent forecast is now ready. We go VNAV. Next page for descent. There it is. Click on forecast and we will load the descent forecasts in. There's our descent forecast. Great stuff. Let's go ahead and check the legs now. Make sure we have no discontinuities. Which we don't. So what we can do now is actually set our full departure. So we are departing runway 15 right. And we are following, let me look at my flight plan here, Kobo, Kilo Oscar Bravo Oscar 1 Alpha, SID, which is that one. So we'll select that and execute. Now, I've looked at the charts for this SID. Our initial altitude is going to be 6,000 feet. We actually don't need to worry about all that stuff yet, because that's setting up the MCP, and that's a later step. You can do it now, of course, but I'm going to try to stick to the flow that is in FS2CREW's own manual. So what it's saying now is, having done the CDU setup, we basically sit and wait. Go play Angry Birds or something. Add 40 minutes to go, so in 8 minutes time the first officer is going to go out for a walkabout. At 29 minutes they will come back. Now that to me struck me as very cool. It's a good demonstration of just how huge a 777 is compared to a 737. I mean, that's an 11-minute walk around. That's pretty crazy. Anyway, so I'm probably going to cut the video here, and we'll rejoin when he goes for his walk around. She goes for her walk around, sorry, and rejoin when she gets back, just so you can hear FS2CREW doing its thing. See you in a second.
I'm out for the walk around.
And there she goes. She'll be back in just over 10 minutes time. So let's advance time once again. See you in a minute.
I'm back from the walk around. Everything looks good.
And she's back. Now you notice that the phase that we're in is that we're getting ready to do the pre-flight checklist. Somebody asked me, I get asked this quite a lot actually on all the FS2CREW videos, can you skip stuff? Can you do stuff yourself and not have the automated first officer do it? Of course you can. You can just click on these arrows up and down here and change the phase. So if you want to do all the pre-flight yourself, or all landing preparations or approach or whatever else, you can just skip the phase that FS2CREW is on by clicking those two arrows. It's actually very, very flexible. Okay, so the next thing that's going to happen is 24 minutes out, we're going to have a gate agent or flight attendant ask us about boarding. So I'll see you when that happens. I'm going to unmute, ready to deal with that.
Hi guys, can we start boarding now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that picked me up just fine. Now because boarding is going to happen, we're actually going to fire up GSX at this point, and we'll get GSX boarding as well. There. GSX is probably going to ask us to open a bunch of doors and stuff like that. So now what we're waiting for is 19 minutes out. At 19 minutes out, the first officer is going to perform their pre-flight flow. Jeez, that's hard to say. Anyway, for now though, GSX wants me to open the left entry door number 1. So we'll click on menu. FS actions, doors, left entry number 1, that would be that one. We'll disarm the door and then open it. That should make GSX pretty happy. And just to be certain GSX is happy, we'll pop outside and take a look. Now I should have said that we're not at the gate. It actually thinks we're at a gate, we're not, we're actually at a stand. Although here in King Khaled, gate 25 is actually where we're at, so it is officially a gate, but it's not. If that makes any sense at all. People boarding now. The luggages are coming along as well. There they are. So not much to do now until 19 minutes out for the pre-flight flow or advanced time until we get there. There we go, pre-flight flow just kicked in. Now my pre-flight flow is set up the EFIS control panel, so we'll go ahead and do all that right now. Let's just drop on down to a closer view. We are going to be cleared on this SID up to 6,000, and then when we're about 20 to 25 miles out, that's when you get clearance up to your cruise altitude. Notice the first officer now is doing all the tests, by the way. So we'll wind this down to 6,000. Our V2, we bring back in net rep here. V2 is 150, so we'll put that up here. Oops. First officer messing with everything there. 150. And we're actually going to be following a track on this departure. So let me just bring up the page that I have here in my notes in front of me to look at what we need to track. For this SID, we're actually tracking the 059 radial from King Khaled International. So I need to choose some VOR radios down the bottom here, which we'll do with my handy dandy panel. So that's on 113.3. Let's just dial this here, 113. Maybe she was going through the checklist there. Doing the resets, 113.3, that's all set.
Monitor radar display. Go around.
And we will
wind
set
shear
a track
ahead.
here, 059.
Wind shear ahead.
Now I actually had a
Wind
problem
shear
setting a track
ahead.
because one of the checklist items is to confirm the heading or track, and it didn't like me saying track. So I ended up having to say heading, but you'll see that in a little moment or two. So that's all set up. We'll change the range on our navigation display down. Make sure the flight director is on, captain's first, which they both are. Actually, captain's wasn't first, she had already turned hers on. Verify our instruments, they're all looking good, and then perform the oxygen test. So now we're waiting for 15 minutes out when we can actually do the checklist. In fact, we could probably do it now because it's lit up as white, meaning that she has completed her pre-flight flow and I've completed mine, so we might as well unmute here. Pre-flight, whoops, pre-flight checklist.
Pre-flight checklist. Oxygen.
Tested 100%.
Tested 100%. Flight instruments.
Heading 239 degrees. Altimeter 1015.
Heading 239. Altimeter 1015. Pre-flight checklist complete.
And we're all done, because the other two items were already green, that being the parking brake set and the fuel switches to cut off. There was nothing left to do there. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and do the departure briefing. So we'll set this up. We are departing from a stand, not a gate. It is not takeoff thrust, it is a D-rated takeoff, so reduced thrust. Takeoff config 5, flaps 5, packs will be on, anti-ice will be off. Noise abatement departure procedure is not required. Thrust reduction altitude is 1,000 feet and acceleration is also 1,000 feet. We will be following a SID and we have no concerns, so let's let the briefing run.
Ready for the departure brief?
Go ahead.
Alright, we're at a remote stand. The taxi route out to the departure runway will be as assigned by ATC. This airport does not use ground radar. We will use reduced thrust for takeoff. For the takeoff config, we'll use flaps 5. Packs will be on. Anti-ice is not required. No noise abatement departure procedure is required. Thrust reduction altitude is 1,000 feet. Acceleration altitude is 1,000 feet. Departure routing will be by the ATC assigned SID. As for concerns, there are no special factors for this departure. I'll be the pilot flying today. During the takeoff roll, you call out any malfunction or warning and silence the oral warning. I'll call stop or go. I'll reject the takeoff for any warning condition that significantly affects the safety of the flight. Before 80 knots, I'll reject the takeoff for any of the following. Takeoff config warning, system failures, activation of the master caution system, tire failure, unusual noise or vibration, abnormally slow acceleration if the side window opens, fire or fire warning, engine failure, predictive wind shear warning if the airplane is unsafe or unable to fly. Between 80 knots and V1, I'll reject for a fire or a fire warning, an engine failure, or if the airplane is unsafe or unable to fly. After V1, takeoff will be continued, and no action will be taken before 400 feet, other than to apply toga and to silence the oral warnings. Any questions?
No questions.
Departure briefing complete.
Now, the supremely nerdy among you can actually bypass all of that and do it all yourself. What you need to say is, you actually say, with obviously mute off, "Are you ready for the departure brief?" Your first officer will answer yes. You can then say whatever the hell you want. As long as you end it with any questions, that counts as a briefing. So you can actually run the whole briefing yourself if you're feeling supremely nerdy or in a somewhat comedic mood. Anyway, there's not much for us to do now until 7 minutes out. We're at 14 currently, at which point the load sheet's going to arrive, and we're going to need to accept that from the gate agent. So I will see you at 7 minutes. Alright, so 1 minute to go before the load sheet arrives. Not much to do when it does arrive other than just accept it. One thing that just occurred to me though is when I've streamed FS2CREW before and we've gone through these wait periods, waiting to get stuff done, people have commented about what a palaver it seems and why waste all that time and how crazy it is. Bear in mind, in a real aircraft, it takes a lot longer to do some of the stuff that we're doing here with a simple wave of a mouse, first of all. Second of all, bear in mind, in a real aircraft, the people doing all these procedures are responsible for the lives of a few hundred people sitting behind them. They take their time. They don't rush through things. They try to be methodical about what they're doing and just not take any undue risks with what's going on. Now, FS2CREW is simulating that, which is why there's a considerable wait before anything seems to happen.
Hi guys, here's the load sheet for you.
Thanks. Now, in previous FS2CREWs, that thanks would trigger a response. They would say, "You're welcome," and then they would get off my flight deck. They don't do that anymore. They're a little bit rude. They just say, "Here it is," and walk away. So, fair enough. The next event is really at 5 minutes. It's not really an event. It's something we need to do, which is power up the APU. We'll go ahead and do that right now, and we can get ready to disconnect external power, which you can do talking to the ground. I'm not going to. I'm going to do it through the menu. No reason, just I'm still getting used to the product here. So that's powering up. Let's whiz on down here, bring up the electrical systems. No, we won't. That was a mistake. We'll bring up stat. And watch the APU come online. RPM is rising, oil pressure is rising, EGT is rising, boarding's completed according to GSX, so we're probably going to be asked to close doors. I'm going to let the doors go and see if my first officer really does manage them. I got the impression before that they didn't, even though they're supposed to. Bear in mind this is version 1 of FS2CREW for the 777, so there might be some issues and bugs. We'll see. Not a big deal. We can close them ourselves if we need to. $98.6789. Come on, 100. Just let the EGT stabilize a little bit there. Still climbing. There we go. Settling down now. So with that done, we'll actually go ahead and not use external power now.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board today. As you locate your assigned seats, please place your smaller items under the seat in front of you to provide more room for larger items in our overhead compartments. If you need assistance, contact a flight attendant. If you are unable to accommodate any item in the cabin, please bring it to the boarding door and we will check it for you. Also, review the safety instruction card in your seat pocket. If you are seated at an exit seat, also review the exit seating criteria.
Ground flight deck.
Go ahead.
Please disconnect external power.
Roger, disconnecting the GPU.
So let's see what happens there. See if that really does get done. Always used to. No reason it shouldn't this time around. Ground connections. So the jetway plugs are connected. Air conditioning unit is connected. Oh, there we go. Just remove the jetway plugs.
Captain, the GPU is disconnected.
Thank you. Now we can actually tell the ground as well to remove the air conditioning unit. I'm not sure of the command, but that is in there. Just so you know, it's just Froogle being a noob that I'm not doing it with my voice. Yes, but I'm going to remove that right now. I'm going to remove the wheel chocks. Great. And I know that you can just remove the wheel chocks and it automatically removes everything. I was just going through the options because I felt like it. So with that done, what we need to do now is actually ask permission to pressurize hydraulics. So, ground flight deck.
Go ahead.
Can we pressurize the hydraulics?
Roger, you're clear to pressurize the hydraulics.
Thank you. Alright, so we got clearance to pressurize hydraulics, which is important because the the first officer, FO, is going to ask us if we have that permission shortly. At 2 minutes out now, cargo and passenger doors should close. So less than a minute to go. What I'm going to do is whiz on over here and pop open the door display. And we can see if that happens as it should at 2 minutes. Alright, so here we are at 2 minutes. Going to wait and see. I think I need to do it, even though I set the option. Oh no, entry number 2 just got closed. I manually opened entry number 1. So I might need to close entry number 1 myself. We'll see what happens. I don't think they're going to close it. I think I do need to do that door. Let's go to the doors page here. Now the door needs to be armed. I'm thinking of pushing it a little bit here. I know that when you say arm slides and cross check, that it will actually it should do the arming for you. So I'm going to close that front door and I will arm it myself. Whoops.
Alright guys, everyone's seated. We're all buttoned up and ready to go in the back.
Thanks.
If you need anything, just let me know.
So I'll arm the front door. We'll leave that one unarmed just to see what happens. So we're getting ready to go at this point, so we're going to let the first officer go ahead and do that before start procedure. We'll do our own as well. Before start procedure?
Are we clear to pressurize?
Yes.
Okay.
Alright, so I need to change the CDU to the takeoff ref page, which is right there. We're going to set the MCP speed to V2, well it's already done at 150. We will arm LNAV and VNAV. If they turn green, we have a good lateral and vertical path, which we do. Our initial heading or track is set to 059 degrees. We will make sure that the VOR here is selected on both sides. Initial altitude
I am
is
ready
set
for
at
the
6,000. Our takeoff trim now, hydraulics has been pressurized. We can set that. Should be 3.5. Let's go ahead and do that. Right about there. Right, so we'll just check on ICAS. Engine shutdown warning and TCAS off. That's fine. We'll accept those. I can cancel those if I want to. I say cancel ICAS, but I won't. Before start checklist.
Before start checklist. Flight deck door. Closed and locked. MCP.
V2 150. Track 059. There you go, it didn't like track. Heading 059. Heading 059. Altitude 6,000.
Takeoff speeds.
V1 148. V rotate 148. V2 150.
CDU pre-flight.
Completed.
Completed. Trim.
3.5 units, 0 and 0.
Taxi and takeoff briefing.
Completed.
Before start checklist complete.
Now that trim reading is the trim that I set down here, so it's 3.5 units. The 0 and 0 is rudder and aileron trim. They're both set to 0, which they are. We haven't messed with those at all. So at this point, we should be able to push back. So I really want to bring up that door page. I want to see if the doors do get armed at this phrase I'm about to speak. Don't know if they will. So that door is not armed. Cabin crew arm slides. And it did. They armed the door. That's fantastic. So let's bring back the page that she had on display here, which was the engines. And we will get GSX to do our pushback, which today will be to the left. So it's quite a long pushback as well. Fair for pushback, nose right, tail left. We're actually going to have the first officer do the engine start for us. All we need to do is move the fuel cutoff switches.
Hello, Captain. We are ready for pushback. Locking gear. Departure check completed. Pipe has been inserted. Release parking brakes. Commencing push. All engines clear. Start that wheel.
Start sequence is 2, then 1.
Check.
Start engine 2.
Starting 2. Oil pressure.
Start engine 1.
Starting 1. Oil pressure.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board our flight today. This is the lead flight attendant speaking. Please direct your attention to the cabin crew for important safety information. There is an instruction card in your seat pocket that illustrates the safety equipment on this aircraft. Regulations require compliance with this information as well as all crew instructions, lighted information signs, and posted placards. Fasten your seatbelt by inserting the metal tip into the buckle. Tighten by pulling on the belt. To release your seatbelt, lift the metal flap on the buckle. It is our policy that you keep your seatbelt fastened at all times while seated. Doors are clearly marked with exit signs and instructions for door operation. Each door is equipped with an escape slide. Locate the exit nearest you. The nearest exit may be behind you. In an emergency, lights will illuminate the aisle. The cabin is pressurized. If there is a loss of cabin pressure, a panel will open and oxygen mask will appear. Remain seated with your seatbelt fastened and pull a mask toward you to start the flow of oxygen. Oxygen will be flowing to the mask even though the bag may not inflate. Cover your nose and mouth with the mask. Place the elastic band around your head and tighten by pulling on the ends. Secure your own mask before assisting others. Your seat bottom cushion may be used as a flotation device. Pull up and remove the cushion. Upon exiting the aircraft, place your arms around the cushion and hold on to the straps located on the back. This is a non-smoking flight. Smoking is not permitted in the cabin or lavatories. Cabin lights will now be turned off. Reading light buttons are located above your seat. Thank you for your attention.
Now notice we still have a TCAS off warning on the ICAS. That's fine. First officer will turn TCAS on at the appropriate time. We can't do anything else at this point. We need to wait for the pushback to finish. I mean, we could do stuff, but to be realistic, we need to wait until pushback's finished before we start moving control surfaces. And the first one of those obviously will be takeoff flaps, or flaps 5. That will get the first officer triggered to go and do her bit now on the before taxi flow. Our before taxi flow is flight controls check, and that's it. Hers is that she's going to set the takeoff flaps, turn the APU off if it's already on. It is on. As you can see down there, it's running, so we'll let her turn it off and check recall.
Tow truck disconnected. Bypass being removed.
Alright. Flaps 5.
Flaps 5.
And she's now into her takeoff flow. Notice the flight controls, flight surfaces are actually shown down here, so we can do our flight controls check. So full up, full down, neutral, full left, full right, neutral. And we'll check the rudder.
Left is
Full
clear.
left.
Right is clear.
Full right, and neutral. APU is on cooldown. She did turn the APU off. And she's waiting for our checklist. So, before taxi checklist.
Before taxi checklist. Anti-ice. Auto. Recall. Checked. Flight controls.
Checked.
Ground equipment.
We'll just wait for those guys to actually get out of the way before we confirm that they are clear. Clear.
Before taxi checklist complete.
And we are good at this point to taxi. Now normally at this point I would stop and say tune in part 2 for the takeoff. We'll actually do the takeoff today. And then part 2 of this first look at FS2CREW will be the approach and landing at runway 30 in Dubai, which will be an RNAV approach as well. So let's get this thing moving. Clear left.
Clear right.
Before takeoff checklist.
Before takeoff checklist. Before takeoff checklist complete.
Nothing to do there because the checklist item was takeoff flaps, which we already set. Alright, so we're coming up on runway 15 right. Now I'll admit I made a mistake when you weren't looking. I accidentally nudged the reversers on, which wiped my V-speeds. And having taxied a bit and burned some fuel, my V-speeds have changed. So my new V2 is 153. We'll dial this one up to 153. So that's all set. We'll just cross-check everything here. Track 059, 6,000 feet, RTO on the brake there. Okay, first officer's going to turn TCAS on in a second. So let's go ahead and line up. Oh, I did it again. Look at that. I did it again. I don't know what's up with my controls. Let me just reset that once again. Having some issues with my controls. Anyway, let's unmute. Runway entry procedure.
Check.
You'll see now the TCAS warning will go off. There it goes. Now, as always, it's a rolling start on the 777. You don't stand the power on the brakes. You release the brakes and let it roll. So we're going to put the throttles up to 55%, then hit toga, and away we go, hopefully. As I indicated at the start when we did the configuration of FS2CREW, there are more call-outs in this aircraft than in other versions of FS2CREW, which is why it's kind of cool to watch the takeoff here. Give you an insight into what FS2CREW gets up to. Takeoff.
Check. Thrust set. 80 knots.
Checked.
V1.
Rotate. Positive rate.
Gear up. Gear up.
400 feet.
Checked.
Climb.
Flaps 1. Flaps 1.
Speed check. Flaps 1. 1,000 feet to level off.
Flaps up. Flaps up.
Speed check. Flaps up.
Alright, not the best takeoff in the world because of the change with the V-speeds, I think. That kind of screwed me up a little bit. But anyway, we have a clean aircraft now, so after takeoff checklist.
After takeoff checklist. After takeoff checklist complete.
Now you'll notice FS2CREW is already saying descent checklist. There's not much else to do except when we pass the transition altitude, which is flight level 150 here. We'll set standard and do the cross check there, and that's really it until we head towards descent. It's actually quite easy to manage with FS2CREW. It's actually very similar to the way things are managed with the Airbus, to be honest. That's it for part 1 of this video. Quite a detailed look at everything you go through with FS2CREW to get the 777 powered up and in the air and ready to go. In part 2, obviously, we'll be planning our descent and then approach into Dubai. We're expecting runway 30. It's going to be an RNAV approach. So tune in next time. In the meantime, leave me a comment in the comment section below. Do you think FS2CREW is essential because it adds to the realism? Or do you think it makes this aircraft just a little bit too easy?